Sam, one of the issues you've talked about time and again in terms of developing a world of inclusive growth is that we have to find ways to address poverty, whether it's through innovation or using technology. Poverty is something that we need to continue to reduce as we move forward. Would you share your thoughts on this, please?
I think we have made a lot of progress in the last couple of decades. 1 billion people have been taken out of poverty in the last 20 years. Most of these people came out of poverty in China. The Chinese growth in the last 20, 30 years has been miracle by any standard. Fortunately, we have technology, knowledge, and the skills to reduce poverty today. We know that capitalism, free trade, globalization, deregulation, entrepreneurship, innovation are some of the tools to address poverty. But at the same time, there are a large number of poor people in this world. We have a long way to go. India has probably the largest number. For the next decade, I believe India's challenge is to really reduce poverty. Africa's challenge is to reduce poverty. Africa has land. Africa needs to use technology like China has done to some extent, or like India plans to do, to address poverty. I believe India needs probably to focus like China to address probably close to 500 million people who are still in poverty. It all depends on what standard you use. There is always this debate on what is poverty. And the level of poverty keeps changing anyway. So what you consider poverty level today will be very different from what the poverty level is going to be tomorrow. Like in US, we have seen poverty level has changed constantly in terms of how you decide who is poor. I have said this many times that poverty is not just because of lack of opportunity, lack of money. It is also because of lack of education, lack of nutrition, lack of opportunities. And you have to focus on all of these things to reduce poverty. You can't give somebody some money and say, now you are no longer poor. So you can't say, I'm going to open a bank account for you and beginning tomorrow you are no longer poor. So poverty is that of knowledge too. So when you try to address poverty, you need to address education, health, infrastructure, nutrition, food. When you begin to address all of these things for an individual or a family, you tend to lift them out of poverty. And ultimately, they need to create jobs. They need to really find jobs, because then it is sustainable. Otherwise, government programs are not sustainable. It helps in the beginning to kickstart. Like we have a program in India called Narega, where we provide employment to hundreds of millions of people for 100 days every year if you are very poor. And this may have to do with building community assets like road, water project, or something similar. This really gives them extra income, so they can have something more than just to eat, which is not much. But if that doesn't empower them, then it's of no use in the long run. It's not sustainable. We are also launching a program on food security. So we give subsidized food to hundreds of millions of people basic stuff, rice, wheat, and all that. Now, these kinds of programs are useful to kickstart. But if you don't provide opportunities, you can't sustain this. So that's the challenge for all of us. We also have now in India a thing called right to information, which allows people in rural areas to question government, local government, federal government, state government about the programs, inform them. And this essentially empowers local communities. And we are convinced that democratization of information has to be a very key element in reducing poverty.
I think as you're speaking, this democratization of information reflects back to a word you mentioned earlier, which is empowerment. It's so essential to empower people, whether they are the rural poor in India, the urban poor in the United States, or anywhere else for that matter, that hopelessness can perpetuate these cycles of poverty on top of bad policies and lack of opportunity. And so what's really critical is to be able to reverse this through education, through policies, and ultimately touch the family structure.
Absolutely. But poverty has been with us for a long time. We have made a lot of progress in many areas, but we have not made significant progress in poverty except in the last 20 years. And poverty also comes from our old sort of system where a lot of these countries were dominated by outside power.
Yes.
And when you have outside power or people living in colonization, the mindset is very different.
Yeah, absolutely.
It takes a long time to change that mindset. These people have been colonized for hundreds of years. They can't think independently. They just don't think out of the box, and they think that's what we are supposed to do. We're supposed to be poor. We're supposed to be living like this. They don't realize that the technology has moved on, world has moved on, and you have same opportunity like everybody else. So it's tough. I mean, how do you explain this to people in Africa and people living in rural India and people living in Amazons? To some extent, they are happy with what they do. So poverty, according to whose standard, is also an issue.
Yes.
Some people might say that leave me alone. I'm okay with my poverty.
Yeah.
I'm living in tribal area. I eat local fruits. I don't need 3 shirts. And I'm fine.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one segment. It's the others who are really aspiring to get out of it and keep hitting a glass ceiling that we really need to take a look at.
But the only way to address poverty in countries like India and others is to really focus on increasing GDP growth. I'm told that 1% increase in GDP reduces poverty by 0.6%. I read somewhere recently. I can't remember exactly where I read, but even if it is half. So if you have, 10% growth per year, you can begin to reduce 5% poverty per year. That's a big number.
Big number.
So if I take that, if India has to really reduce poverty, India has to continue to grow at 8 to 10% for next 20 years, like China did.
Yes.
And then you will address poverty. But then the level of poverty will go up. The poverty line will shift, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, as we talked in a previous segment, that approach to growth needs to be inclusive from the outset in
Absolutely.
order to really
because rich cannot really monopolize on taking cream from all the growth. And that's the concern in inclusive growth. That rich have been benefiting, even if you look at today, all the growth and all the, who makes most of the money? Guys who have money.
Yeah, of course. I tell my students, capital aggregates upward. And so it's no question, no secret that the rich get richer.
Yeah.
I recently saw a statistic that indicated that the wealth of the 300 richest people in the world equals the total assets of the 2 billion poorest people in the world, and that's getting more and more extreme. And so if we indeed want a world that works for everyone, we really need to think differently, and so that everyone's responsible when we talk about the issues of poverty.
And it's not about socialism. It's not about saying, get wealth from rich and distribute it to poor.
No,
We are not
that's
talking
never
about
worked.
that.
That's never
We are not
worked.
talking about that. We are really talking about, opportunities,
Yeah.
equal opportunities, little more emphasis on helping underprivileged, and the right kind of policies in the government. Today what happens in many parts of the world is that rich, bureaucracy, and politicians, they all form unspoken club. You scratch my back and I'll scratch your back. In the process, all of the development gets cornered by a handful of people. And rest of the population is just watching them take benefit of it. And they can't stand it, but they feel helpless. They vote once a year or once every 5 years, whatever it is. But that's not what they are looking for. They are also looking for piece of the pie. And that's where inclusive growth comes in. I think if we address poverty in the next 20 years, 30 years in the world, we'll address a lot of the security issues, a
Absolutely.
lot of the issues related to violence. And it will also make people feel good. Their self-esteem will go up.
For sure.
Their self-confidence will go up. People don't mind others being rich, but they mind when they don't have nothing.
Yeah. As long as people feel their children in particular have an opportunity that's unlimited,
That's
that's what really